Hi everyone, happy Friday. Welcome to the Outcome Selling Advisory Ecosystem meeting on the sales talent gap. We're really happy that all of you are able to join today. My name is Kasha. I'm the director of the group. Our CEO, Chad Quinn, and our CTO, Mike Plaskow, as well as Jennifer Camber, our Vice President of Customer Success, are also here with us today. We are thrilled to have Dave Brock, who's the CEO of Partners in Excellence and author of the Sales Manager Survival Guide, here with us as a guest. He's going to be leading a discussion on the skills and attributes of the next generation seller, as well as strategies for hiring, training, and retaining your sales teams. Please chime in with any thoughts during the meeting, as we want this to be a discussion. And I wanted to just briefly review some logistics. We're recording this meeting so that right afterwards we can share it with all of you, as well as all the members who were not able to attend. If you could please mute yourself when you're not speaking to reduce background noise, that would be helpful. And please turn your video on in order to facilitate the conversation. And I'm now going to hand this over to Chad, who will provide updates to our 2019 content agenda since last meeting.
Thank you, Kasha, and welcome members. Always great to see these faces from all over the world joining us today. So as Kasha mentioned, we're going to kind of talk about our content agenda. And the reason we'd like to start with this in each session is because it's shaped by each of you. These are a compilation of very thoughtful one-on-one conversations we have with each of the members to kind of cull out the key topics that you care about that we can focus on. So today is a really terrific topic. Highly relevant, the sales talent gap. I'm thrilled to have Dave join us to talk us through this. This is all about what does that next generation seller look like? How do we recruit this person? How do we hire this person? How do we coach and mentor and develop this person? What are the skills and attributes of a next generation seller? A hugely relevant topic for each of the sales leaders on our call today, and Dave will be our guide for that discussion. And I'll do a proper introduction of Dave after we kind of go through a summary of the content agenda. We do have some updates on some specific next meetings. One of them is, and this is a model that I hope we really embrace as a membership of the ecosystem, where we have members really delivering to other members some of their thought leadership. So Dave Klippel at Palo Alto is going to be talking with us about building a successful value management team. And that date there in March, as you see, is going to be our next big session. So please, for all those that are interested in how does value management relate to a sales organization, what's the go-to-market strategies, how do we work together in synchrony with sales and customer success to deliver customer value, a really topical issue that Dave will be discussing from his own experience and his own perspective. We also have an update on a live session. This is going to be kind of a neat one, hopefully, that we undergo. We're going to be videoing a live interview with Eric Omquist. And folks may know Eric as the managing partner at Bain and somebody who has written in the Harvard Business Review a very provocative set of research called the 40 Elements of Value, and looking at value beyond just product value. And so Eric will be part of our session, and we'll take live Q&A from our members of the outcome selling ecosystem so that you can really have some time to probe him on parts of your own value proposition and how you can evolve it. And then we're going to be talking with, again, another member-driven dialogue. Alex Hesterberg will be talking about this really interesting topic of outcome mapping. How do we look at going what I consider kind of an outside-in approach versus an inside-out? So let's go outside to the customer outcome and map back into our capabilities, as opposed to leading with capabilities and then in search of an outcome. And Alex is doing some great work in that area, and we'll be sharing it with members ongoing. And then we have Steve Silver, who is now part of Forrester, and we'll be providing kind of insights on a sales intelligent platform and how AI and other of these key emerging technologies influence a sales architecture. And then we have a couple of TBDs that we're still working through on dates, one around this very hot topic of value realization. So the classic question from the CFO who says, for the check I wrote, what did we get for it? We need to have an answer as progressive suppliers to that question, and we'll have a thoughtful dialogue on that. And then also outcome-based customer agreements. To what extent and to how much do we go into a true outcome arrangement with our customers? Now, having said that, these are placeholders and some future ones. I want every member to feel empowered to know that as you look at some of these topics, if there's some that you really have a burning desire, I would encourage you to talk to Kasia, and we'll make sure that we fit them into 2019. This is really your agenda that we will help facilitate and execute around. So that's a little insight on the agenda going forward. To our topic today, again, highly relevant. What is that next generation seller? How does she work, behave? What are her skills, attributes? What is the way that we can coach and mentor this next generation seller to get the most out of and leverage this critical resource? And our guide for it is somebody that is terrific as both an author around sales excellence, as well as an advisor with high-tech companies like IBM, HP, and Microsoft. Perhaps most important to me is that he's just a very good human being and a very thoughtful person, and somebody who, if I would encourage every member that if you don't have his blog, Partners in Excellence, it is part of my routine, and many folks at Ecosystems, we subscribe to his blog because Dave really is provocative in his thoughts and thoughtful in the way that he approaches topics. So I would encourage you to take a look at his blog ongoing and become part of his ongoing thought process. So Dave's going to be our guide in this discussion of around the sales talent gap and the crisis that's underway and how we can think about it. And so hopefully each of us will benefit from that. I'll just maybe close before handing it over to Dave and say, what I love about our membership in this ecosystem is how fertile you are in your questions and how proactive you are in probing and trying to understand some of the concepts that are being put in place. Dave and I are very kismet on this issue. So as he goes through this content, feel free to engage. We want this to be a conversation, not a presentation. And so with that, I will turn it over to Dave to lead us through the conversation.
Well, super. Well, Chad, thank you so much. I was flattered by that introduction. I mean, the last time I was introduced, it was Brent Adamson of Gartner, and he said, you know, Dave's really a jerk, but you ought to listen to him anyway.
Right.
So I was really humbled and flattered by your introduction, and thank all of you for taking the time well, for me, it's this morning, this afternoon, or this evening, wherever you are. We're going to cover this whole area of talent. I find myself, as I start talking to top executives in our client base and in other organizations, this whole issue of talent is reaching crisis levels and becoming a huge, huge, huge issue. And I think that a lot of people misunderstand it in terms of the breadth and context and importance to organizations, and so on, and maybe misunderstand some things and choices we have in terms of how talent complements and reinforces our strategies and how we engage customers and how we go to market. So we'll cover a whole bunch of things here. I know earlier this week when we were kind of going through a rehearsal, and Kasia, Diana, and Jennifer and I were talking about this, I said, well, on this slide, the last discussion was about 5 hours. And so we won't have 5 hours on any one slide, but there's a lot of stuff here. And what I'll try and do, I'd really like this to be more of a discussion than me presenting, is I'll kind of pause at every slide to, you know, jump in and give me your ideas and your feedback. And, you know, oftentimes I'm full of shit. So feel free to call me on that, because I think we'll come at better answers and better ways of you know, addressing the things that concern you. So broadly speaking, we're going to kind of start at the top and say, what is this talent crisis? What's it mean to us? And what are some of the things we need to be thinking about as we start looking at sales talent? And then we'll start diving down into saying, well, what does this mean in terms of the types of people we need to bring on board, both from behaviors, attitudes, skills, competencies, and so on? What are we seeing as some of the emerging skills needs that may be very different from what we've thought about in the past or how we've staffed in the past? We'll talk a little bit about some tools that we leverage pretty heavily, and they're pretty common on the marketplace. Everybody has their own variety of competency models and things like that, but they're very powerful in helping us, one, understand what we need, get what we need, and develop a roadmap for developing these people and developing these skills to meet our business needs. We'll then bridge to a couple of upcoming challenges, and then we'll get to, I think, what is probably the meatiest part of the conversation, is how people are leveraging talent in addressing these talent challenges in their go-to-market strategies. And we'll have a few examples, one from some work at Salesforce, work at a company called Novozymes in Copenhagen, and from Microchip, as just kind of examples of different things people are doing to really develop, execute their sales strategies and leverage talent in very, very different ways. So again, I hope this to be as interactive as possible, and call me on, when I'm being too glib. Generally, the more I wave my arms around, the more I'm lying to you. So watch for that. And also, if we can move on, to the next slide, Diana. So I think, in fact, as we were setting up this meeting, amongst the kind of working group of us, we all had a little bit of kind of different understandings about what the talent crisis is. And I think one of the things that I see when I talk to a lot of executives and mid to upper level sales managers is, I think we tend to look at talent in its impact on our organizations and our ability to execute our strategies. I think we tend to look at it in probably too narrow a way. We tend to look at it as, how do we find and hire, assess and hire the right kind of people to bring into our organizations? How do we onboard them? How do we train and coach them to make sure that they execute at as high levels as possible? But the talent crisis is really about more than that, or talent management issue is really about more than that. And Diana, if you could move on, is we really are starting to see talent is really a strategy and really a design problem. Is that as we start looking at how are we going to engage our customers? What are our strategies to who we engage, how we help them manage through their buying process? We have a number of trade-offs to how we're going to do that. And those trade-offs have very, very interesting implications on the types of people we put in place, the types of structures we put in place. For instance, do we leverage account managers? Do we leverage product or solution specialists? Do we have SDRs, and so on and so forth? So we have to kind of look at talent on a very broad basis to say, what's our engagement strategy? How do we design that strategy to allow us to be both effective and efficient in reaching our customers and helping them solve their problems? And so we start looking at, there are a whole bunch of things that we have choices that we have to be making on in terms of, again, our strategy, our organizational capability, our cost constraints, and things like that. So, I hope to really kind of help you kind of think about this in a more broad basis and as part of our overall strategy and our overall go-to-market design. If we can move to the next one, and we'll pause a little bit after the next couple, to me, it's meaningless to have a discussion about talent and talent strategies without first starting with our customers. As we start seeing what our customers are facing in their environments, and I think a good reflection is as we look within our own organizations, as we start seeing what we face and our customers face, we're seeing increasing levels of complexity. And you see all these buzzwords around here around ambiguity, distraction, confusion, change, all those sorts of things. Kind of the way that we're starting to package this issue around is we're seeing huge levels of turbulence at all levels in the organization. You know, so this is the world that increasingly our customers are facing. And if we're going to engage our customers effectively, we have to understand where they're at, and we have to have salespeople and sales skills with engagement strategies that help them start understanding and navigating through this. Are you guys seeing similar kinds of complexity, you know, turbulence and these issues facing your customers? And how are you dealing with some of that?
This is Brian DeLamos here at RSA. I can speak about this for a moment if that's okay.
Certainly.
Yeah, I do see these as challenges. I can say in the security industry, there are so many options for a salesperson now to get distracted by, meaning that when I started in the security industry, there were maybe 20 or 30, 40 at most companies out there to work at. Now there's a few thousand, and they range from seed funding to mega corporations. And so I find that a lot of salespeople who have anywhere less than about 10 years of experience can be rather impatient with the process that it takes to build up a territory, truly become expert in the process and product line, and can often feel like that there's easy money or right around the corner for them at a different company. And you see this a lot in folks' resumes or their LinkedIn profiles, where I'm seeing more and more people who have been at companies for about 1 year and 7 months. You're there for a year, you figure out how it works, and then you spend the next year, the next 7 months getting a different job. So that's a challenge that we deal with here from a variety of different angles, because we need people to really put the time in to learn. And we have become a company, frankly, that's spent a lot of money on enablement, both from a product and a sales training side. And I think our reputation in the industry is that we do that, and other companies benefit by taking our reps because we spend a lot of time doing that. And we have shifted our focus a bit to hire folks who have more experience, I think, than we used to, because we need people who are willing to put probably at least 3 years in to really, you know, they'll do well in years 1 and 2 also, but you need to commit.
Yeah, I mean, these are really important issues, and we'll actually get into some of these and kind of the economics of some of these. You know, I look at kind of these people decisions we're making are multi-million-dollar decisions, and sometimes we make them very, very casually and to devastating impact and all. But I think your point too is really kind of interesting. Within our own organizations, within our own salespeople, they are experiencing this. We work with one of our clients is a Fortune 25 industrial products organization. We were working with one of their divisions, which is a fairly high performing division. But all of a sudden we noticed something, and we found that they had 9% of their time available for selling. And that was defined by preparing to meet with the customer, meeting with the customer, and doing that follow-up stuff. And so you start asking the question, well, what's happening to the other 91% of the time? And it was kind of the complexity and turmoil of getting things done within their own organization. And it was, you know, they had all sorts of well-intended resources that were helping them, but just their own organizations were getting so complex, the rate of change and things like that were distracting them from doing their job. And so what you start doing is saying, well, how do you start doing something as simple as recovering time available for selling? But the other thing that's perhaps as important, even more important, is our customers are facing this. And our customers are facing this kind of uncertainty and this dilemma of how do we make sense of our jobs and what do we go? Diana, if you can move forward. Some of you may be fans. I spend a lot of time with the guys at Gartner, formerly CEB, in kind of talking about the future of selling and so on. And some of you may have seen what they came out with probably about a year ago of what I call the chaotic buying journey. And all of us, you kind of grew up where we tend to think the buying journey and selling process was relatively linear. And, we managed it from beginning to end. And now what we're starting to see is buying journeys are actually very, very complex and chaotic. And we start seeing that in results too with fewer than kind of 47% of buying journeys ending in a decision being made. Most buying journeys end in failure. And what we're starting to see is that customers are overwhelmed, confused, and overloaded, and they don't know how to deal with this kind of chaos. And so the concept that we're now starting to talk about is there's a huge role for the salesperson in this whole area of sense making. How do I help the customer put together and make sense of what they're doing, where their challenges are, where they might go, and how they get there? How do I help them make sense of this chaotic buying process of how we get from start to finish and produce business results? So now more and more, particularly in the complex selling process, we're seeing this whole concept for sense making and helping customers understand what they need and how to make progress in achieving their goals becoming really important. And as a result of this whole concept around sense making, of dealing with these increasing levels of complexity and these faster rates of change, what we start seeing is really the need for skills that are very different than we may have traditionally recruited for. So maybe if we could go on to the next chart. We've kind of divided this, I've kind of divided this into a couple of different things. One is attributes, things that we may look at in terms of characteristics for hiring people. They may be certain behaviors, certain attitudes, and so on and so forth. And, so things that we're seeing critical and things that we're seeing organizations actually make decisions on and assess people, test people, and evaluate people on things are things like a growth-oriented mindset. Things like culture, values, and fit become really great. I don't know how many times where we've seen theoretically very, very talented salespeople who just aren't the right fit for the organization, and they go into the organization and fail. So, we start seeing this laundry list of different kind of characteristics, some of which are overlapping, of culture, behavior, attitudes. We're starting to see some of these themes, and for some of you who read a lot, you'll see some similarity. A lot of this goes back to Peter Senge's work in the fifth discipline, where you start looking at things like personal mastery and these creating learning organizations, both individuals as learners and organizations as learners, a relentless focus on execution and kind of cycling between that learning and execution. Mental models of how we view the customer, how we view the world, and kind of being able to structure that using kind of systems thinking type skills in very, very interesting ways. So we start looking at some of those as being key attributes, which we may not have looked at very much in the past. We then start leveraging on these things like skills, critical skills. Now, and this chart is maybe a little bit disorganized. If you look at the lower right now we're saying table stakes are things like this, the skills and capabilities of very high level consultative salespeople. today. Those are kind of table stakes. You can't exist and thrive as a salesperson if you don't have those base capabilities, but we're finding those are no longer sufficient. So we're finding people training and recruiting, training, and developing in areas like curiosity, creativity, critical thinking, problem solving become very, very critical. You know, as we look at things like helping our customers navigate through their buying process, collaboration skills, facilitation skills, those kinds of things. Increasingly, and you'll see some examples where project management and resource orchestration become very, very critical. We're starting to see account managers, because of the breadth of their solution sets and the breadth of issues they're addressing in their accounts, their primary value is getting the right resources from their company into the right customers at the right time, or helping the customer get the right resources on products to move forward, on projects to move forward in things like that. How are you seeing some of these critical skills? Is this a fairly good list? Are there some things that you would add to the list or change about it? Thoughts?
Dave, I'll jump in. This is Chad.
I'll weigh in on this one.
Go ahead, please.
There's another element here that we look for in our organization, and that is, I guess, what I would call industriousness, grit, tenacity.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, when you look at, we tend to hire fairly inexperienced salespeople and try to grow them inside our organization. We've actually found, given the way that we sell, hiring people with more extensive sales experience have a higher failure rate on our organization. So we tend to look for a lot of these elements that you have here and then teach them how to do this stuff. But it's also that element of the figure it out factor and willing to, you know, just do what it takes to succeed, that grit and that tenacity. And we tend to evaluate that with a series of project executions they do in the interview process and in training. And we found that when we find those people, they tend to be much more successful. Like when they bring in that grit and tenacity, they bring in that curiosity and that critical thinking, they tend to do well.
That's the thing that we're seeing too. And I mean, and unfortunately I see too much of almost the opposite, is where, you know, there are a lot of organizations that are saying, you know, we can completely orchestrate the process, do step A, step B, step C, step C, D, and so on and so forth. Here is the script, and stick to the script. And you're almost, to the degree, perhaps I'm overstating it, but we're dumbing down the sales organization. And when you see what our customers are facing, you know, they're facing things that are exactly in contrast to that. And so you start thinking, we can never teach our salespeople everything they need to know to engage the customer appropriately. We can never give them enough scripts that'll be contextually relevant to that individual at a point in time, with the specific situation that they're trying to do. So this whole concept of grit and tenacity, and you know, I kind of capture those things in the ability to figure things out. You know, and you know, so underlying training on curiosity, creative thinking, problem solving, all that helps that. But that drive to say, this is a complex problem. My job is to figure this out and to help the customer figure this out and navigate through that. And increasingly, we're finding that, you know, when you find those things, you actually change how you invest in things like sales enablement, change how you invest in things like tools and so on and so forth, because these people are naturally going to find those things themselves, and we don't have to put in place as much of the structure and process and things that we might normally think of as we dumb down the sales organization.
You know, another one I just wanted to throw in, because, you know, this is something that we struggle with on a regular basis as we've changed our business portfolio, and, you know, and buying technology has gone more towards buying solutions as opposed to, you know, one-off products. Yep. but it's this idea of having more, operational knowledge and expertise. Because what's happening is when we used to have products, we'd put a product in the seller's hands. They had 13 weeks to make their quota in a quarter, and they would just go off and sell, because these were more transactional type sales. Now, when you get into more complex solution selling, we're working with the sales team to get them to realize, that you have to build a backlog of opportunities, because the sales cycle is probably going to be longer, and it's going to be more complicated. So we are making sure that there's enough opportunities going into each quarter that they have to work on, progress, and close to be able to make their quota. But at the same time, they're developing out quarter business as well, so that they've got a pipeline of opportunities that they can focus on when they hit the next quarter and the next quarter. They just can't be chasing those 13 weeks, like they did in the past.
Well, and that gets into, a few really interesting dynamics is, too often we tend to wait till the customer's well through their buying process. The CEB stuff says customers engage us at 57% through the stuff. Forrester has you at 90% through the buying process. So typically a lot of their buying process and a lot of where we can add value and influence, we miss. And then there's the huge market opportunity of customers because of their own complexity, because of the own turbulence they face. There's a huge amount of customers that need to change, but don't know they need to change. And so that's kind of, as I kind of look at maybe an iceberg model, what we typically see in people's pipelines, and a lot of the approach right now is people are only dealing with the tip of the iceberg. But the real opportunity is as we start getting underneath that surface and intercepting people earlier in their buying process, or even inciting them to buy, and there you get into the real leadership role of really driving their process. But the ability to do that requires very, very different skills than those people that are, and I'm kind of crassly saying, sitting by the phones waiting for it to ring.
Hey, Dave, this is Mark Tafakis. I apologize for not being on video. The one thing I would add here, it's been really interesting. I work at Sprinkler. I run global enablement for them, and I've been here for about a year and a half. And one of the things that I've gravitated to as we're screening candidates is the ability to actually create, manage, and govern a strategic business plan, not to be confused with a territory plan or an account plan or an opportunity plan. It gets more tactical the lower down you get. But it's more the strategic business plan and how you approach that, where you're defining, your objectives, your strategies, your initiatives, the required capabilities to go make it happen. And, Salesforce, I think, had this thing called V2 Mom. We've got something at Sprinkler called W2 HMO. I'm not a big fan. It sounds like a healthcare plan, but it's, it's being very descriptive in the things that you need to be able to do to manage the business like it's a franchise. And you'd be shocked. It's just been amazing to me as we screen and interview candidates coming in that they've never been trained. And I'm talking, 15, 20-year veterans that have never been trained and educated on how to put together a business plan. The ones that have, or that can quickly gravitate that are off the wall, consistently going to P Club in managing.
Yeah, you'll see in a couple of the examples we have in a few charts, other organizations doing exactly the same thing. They're trying to intercept their customer in a different way, and that requires a different way of thinking on the salesperson's part, and then a whole different level set of skills. And so the crisis we see is some people just don't have the mindset to do that. Some people, so they may be the wrong people, and we may have to churn our organizations a little bit. Some organizations haven't figured out that that's really what drives differentiation, value creation, and so on and so forth, and that they're missing, the whole bottom part of the iceberg. They're just waiting for the top part. Yesterday, I wrote a post that says, never respond to an RFP that you didn't write. But I'm seeing, most people waiting till the very last of the process and getting engaged where there's very, very little differentiation. It's a low skill level, but if we really want to attack and grow the market the way we want to, we have to intercept them level, and we have to have that kind of strategic vision of how am I going to capture the customer's imagination, and how am I going to, help guide them through, this is the most important thing for them to be doing, and help guide them through putting that in place. And that's a whole new set of skills. Once you master that, the level of differentiation, the level of deal that you go after, and the way you accelerate all the things like customer loyalty, customer growth, and so on and so forth, just skyrocket. And I mean, you'll see a couple of examples where, we see people taking step function changes in performance with that simple kind of transformation. It's easy to say, but it's hard to execute.
Hey, Dave, John Mills over at Commvault.
Yep.
So question, what has your experience been, the influence or the impact of FirstLine management, right? From both a hiring perspective as well as the coaching and engagement perspective?
Absolutely critical. In fact, I mean, the commercial advertisement is I'll later on send me your address. I'll send you a copy of Sales Manager's Survival Guide, which is the FirstLine manager. What we found is we've underinvested in the FirstLine sales manager in terms of understanding what their job is, giving them the skills to do the job, and making those kinds of investments and guiding the organization that way. And so the real critical, I think, intervention point that we're seeing is if you get your FirstLine managers to start recognizing this is what drives success. 2 is recruiting for that, identifying how do we find that. 3 is the ongoing coaching and development for it. Too often I talk to frontline sales managers and they say, I have an open job. I got to fill it as quickly as I can. I've interviewed 5 candidates. I'll settle for the best of those 5. And you say, well, how did you choose that person? Well, we had chemistry. And you don't see them going through a structured process of what do we need to be successful with our customers, and am I recruiting people, and am I developing people to continue to achieve and grow that success. So let's move on to the next thing. So, so part of this is how we find and develop talent, and we'll go through that. And part of this is just kind of the topic we just talked about, Diana, is, it's such a simple, almost kind of brain dead thing, is we need to develop competency models. Basically what I say is I want to have a picture of my ideal candidate for this specific role. So a picture of my ideal candidate for an account management role might be very different from a picture of a candidate that I have for a sales specialist role, or for an SDR role, or something like that. So we have to develop competency models. There are a bunch of really good competency models out there. ATD has one. We've developed and kind of expanded one. Where I see most competency models fall short is they focus on skills, experience, selling skills, those kinds of things. They may focus a little bit on attributes, being able to, being resilient and those kinds of things, taking no for an answer and that kind of thing, being time disciplined and that. But where I see most of them falling really short are on the first couple of things: culture, value, beliefs, mindset, behaviors, and attitudes. If we aren't recruiting people with those right characteristics, again, I've seen so many times where we've recruited somebody who theoretically should be a trained killer that fails miserably because they just don't fit into the organization. And I think that's one of the reasons we see such high turnover rates, both voluntary and involuntary attrition, One of the people I work with, it's a company called Microchip, and you'll see an example with them later. Their recruiting culture is really oriented around those top two things and some of the kind of sales behavioral characteristics. And if I look at, they're developing a real high performance organization that has 2% voluntary and involuntary turnover. You know, and you look at the economic value of that, it's phenomenal. So you have these things called competency models, and as we build competency models, Diana, if you could go to the next one, you kind of explode these. So as I look at behaviors and attitudes, well, what does that really mean? And so as I'm starting to think of developing this, I want to develop these pictures where I get into really deep levels of how do I recognize what I'm looking for and make sure I'm hiring as close to this ideal picture as possible? And so you'll see typically behaviors and attitudes will break into a large number of criteria. The first one you'll see is slightly different because typically I like to structure something like time focused as measured or observed by. I like to do these in complete sentences so we know what we're recognizing. So, you know, if I have something there, for instance, like team orientation or curiosity, what do I mean by those words? So where I see people failing is just, you know, let me express that in a full sentence of how do I recognize that? How do I observe it? How do I measure it? So we all have a common base to look at when we go from there. So as we look at competency models, Diana, you can, and so we build these things and kind of customize them. There are a couple of real powerful things we can leverage from these competency models. One is we can look at, as we're recruiting people, what are the different competencies and all we have by roles? So I can start looking at SDRs are going to have certain levels of competencies, certain behaviors, certain attributes that I want. Inside sales will have different salespersons, account managers, sales specialists. So I have to develop these for each of the roles that I have. What are the competencies that I have? But then I also can look at it is how do I mature and grow a person in this role? So, you know, where are they going to be on the right, this looks like an account manager, where do they need to be for me even to be interested in hiring them? Where do I need them to be after onboarding? And then as I grow and develop them in their career, where do they need to be after a year when they reach a senior level or maybe even when they reach a managerial level? So these are some fairly simple tools that help provide us roadmaps to finding the right people, developing them, and identifying what's most critical for us in moving forward. Okay, so there's some tools like that. I'll send to Chad and company some templates that we have. You're welcome to use them. Basically, we find it's best to kind of customize these to your unique needs because every company is different and how you go to market is different. One of the big issues I face, and I'd love your reaction to this, is, you know, I get to executives and I'm talking about this and they say, but we're in deep trouble. How can I afford to make these investments in training and skills development? How can I afford to find these people when I'm only going to keep them for 15 to 22 months? You know, the economics behind this start looking tragic. And the data right now is the average tenure of salespeople and managers is somewhere in the range of 15 to 22 months. Over the last 3 or 4 years, it's gone from about 20 to 28 months down to 15 to 22 months. What are you all seeing in terms of, are you seeing similar kinds of things in terms of tenure, whether it's voluntary or involuntary attrition? Are you seeing longer tenures?
We have just one or the other, right? We have folks that have been here for, I don't know, 8, 10 years, and then we have folks that have been here for, 10, 15 months. Our attrition's kind of gone up. And I'm curious, is that you're seeing it's because, as the gentleman earlier said, that people come in, they want to find the next bigger and better deal, or is because the job market is just so, especially in tech where I play, is so vibrant right now that people are always finding the bigger and better deal.
I'm a little bit hard-nosed on this. I think one is I think very few managers, particularly frontline managers, understand the economic model around this, because each person that we're hiring is a multi-million-dollar investment. So you think is, if I'm buying a piece of capital equipment that, say, maybe a $5 million piece of capital equipment, we put committees together, we go through all sorts of analysis, and we're very careful about making that investment. But now you look at it and say, each salesperson I'm bringing on board is a multi-million-dollar investment, not in terms of maybe what I'm spending on that person in terms of recruiting, hiring, paying them, and training them, but it's all an opportunity cost. You know, am I getting the right person that can go out there and be productive and maximize what they're producing? So we're really making multi-million-dollar investments, but I see, particularly in frontline managers, they're not making that connection. You know, it's, if I get a bad hire, I can fire them in 30 days, I can bring on somebody else and do that, and they kind of forget about the opportunity cost. Customers aren't stopping buying just because we don't have a salesperson covering them. So I do find a mindset that I put straight to management, that we aren't understanding the economic cost and the investments in salespeople. I do see a little bit of, I think we have a bit of a, culturally, particularly in North America, I see this very differently in Europe, in the rest of the world, but culturally, I see us having a bit of a mindset around disposable employees. You know, as our needs go up, we ramp down, and so on and so forth. And we don't create, you know, so you know, I hire more people, I divest people, I hire more people. Diana, maybe if we go to the next slide, is we need to change our mindset around people. We need to treat them almost like these capital assets that are multi-million dollars. And are we, basically the bottom line to this is, are we creating work that is meaningful for the person? Are we creating workplaces that challenge them and make them want to stay? And so this revolving door that we see, and I see the revolving door in Silicon Valley every day, and with large organizations, is, you know, we need to start looking at how do we create organizations and work and workplaces that are meaningful, that people are challenged, feel they contribute, and want to stay in. And all, because, you know, fundamentally, you know, as I look at the churn in a lot of the clients in Silicon Valley and some of the boards I sit on, and when I start talking to people about why they left, it's less about compensation, but though that's an element of it, but it's just, you know, they had a manager that sucked. They didn't like the work. They didn't seem to be contributing in a meaningful way, particularly as you look at millennials. Millennials are looking for meaning in their lives. You know, so I think a lot of this really started a lot back in the, you know, 90s and has persisted through 2000 and into this decade, where we have changed the way we value people. And I think that's created devastating consequences for our organizations and frankly, for our society. Am I way off the rails on that?
Hey, Dave. This is Kasha. I just wanted to let you know there's only like 5 minutes left if there's anything in particular you did want to make sure that you cover.
Tell you what, let's go into the examples real quickly, because again, I could go. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to give you a few examples of how people are leveraging strategy and talent with how they go to market and how they intercept the customers and solve problems differently. And the first one is actually a very, very old one. It's Salesforce. And most of you may not, I think Chad and I are probably the only ones old enough to remember back to the old days of CRM, you know, when it was pretty much dominated by people like Siebel and so on and so forth in the mid-90s. And you used to see these were huge enterprise-wide, very, very complex decisions. I have one client, one of the very, very large telecommunications companies in the US, that it took 3 years and about $50 million for them to implement their Siebel system, and it failed. You know, and so all of a sudden Mark comes in and he says, we're going to redefine the problem, redefine how we sell this to, redefine who we sell it to, and change the problem that we're solving. And that consequently drove the way they staffed, the way they sold, and how they hired people to sell very differently. So Mark had the brilliance of taking this from, it had nothing to do with cloud or SaaS or anything like this. He changed the decision people made. Rather than an enterprise-wide, complicated decision, he started going to individual salespeople, sales managers, small departments, and said, you want a CRM system? I can get you, give me a credit card, I can get you up to date. And so he chose to intercept the customer in a very different way, define their problem in a very different way. And he moved kind of from this complicated space to this obvious space. And if you looked at how he staffed his organization, you know, that's the foundation of you know, Aaron Ross's predictable revenue with this what's now known as the SaaS sales approach, where we can actually simplify the buying process dramatically, change how it's bought, change the skill levels and the cost levels that are required to do this, and achieve great success. And then, you know, as Salesforce evolved, you know, it wasn't until a number of years ago that they first put in place enterprise salespeople. And so now they're attacking companies in a couple of different areas. One is the department by department or salesperson by salesperson, pull out your credit card, spend $65 a month or whatever it is, to these enterprise-wide sales with the entire product line. And this is how I go after 7-Eleven Japan and get 7,000 seats in one fell swoop. You know, so they're designing how they engage the customers, and then that decides how they staff and the talent that they need to solve that problem. The next one is another similar kind of example. It's a client of mine called Novozymes. Novozymes is a basic materials company. They make yeast, you know, and yeast is a commodity. You know, it used to be the way people bought this is procurement agents would say, this is how many tankers I need of yeast. This is the price I'm willing to pay. You know, and they started saying, this isn't very exciting, you know, we can't compete on a price basis. So they said, we're going to change how we engage the customer. And so they started changing who they engaged and how they engaged. And they started thinking, going to the customer and said, we're really concerned about your customers. So one of the big success stories we had with that is they go to P&G. It turns out yeast is used in Tide. And they said, what's the future of laundry and how do you gain global share of the laundry market in Tide? And it turns out that detergent is different around the world. Why people in the US buy brighter brights, whiter whites. People in Brazil buy smell. People in other parts of the world buy the feeling of the cloth. And so what they chose to do was say, we're going to work with the customer at a different level in a different way to help them, and we're going to provide skills. So here, their account managers, what we started training their account managers on were skills around strategic alliances, around partners, around project management, around being able to have conversations with business people and business strategists about the way they wanted to take their sales, the way they wanted to grow their organizations. So it was a much more sophisticated salesperson oriented at their key accounts that engaged people that they had never engaged before in ways that they had never engaged before. So it was both how we go to market and what skills do we need to do this, and that's become kind of the cornerstone. And they've complemented that with, some specialists that have lesser skills and less broad skills, but very, very deep skills in, how I make a yeast work with a particular detergent versus how I make another yeast work with, how your bread looks or how your cheese looks or so on and so forth. And so this has become the cornerstone for their go-to-market strategy, and as a result, become the cornerstone for the skills they develop and how they train their people. Then the third one is Microchip. Microchip is probably one of the best sales organizations I've ever seen. And so they've been on this evolution for a very long time. And basically, as exotic as semiconductors are, semiconductors are glorified pieces of sand. They're commoditized. And so they've been on this journey. Several years ago, we worked with them and kind of looking at things like curiosity and critical thinking and problem solving and so on. But now they're moving the bar up quite a bit, and they're saying, what we want to do is we want to help you become more successful in your markets in all that. So these are problems their customers have, but they hadn't been engaging those particular customers. So if you look at the lower left, you see the typical product development, product launch kind of life cycle. You have a lot of sunk cost in each one of the upfront. Excuse me?
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Yeah, we're right at the end in the very last minute.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's anything you want to tie off on.
Okay, well, so again, what we started doing is we started changing who we had the conversation with, the skills we needed to have, and so on and so forth. So if we just go through one more slide and then we're at the end, so part of what we need to do is we need to think differently, not just about skills, but how we want to engage our customers. There are some things like, what if we thought differently about the SDR role? What if rather than putting SDRs as new hires, what if we put our very, very best people into SDR roles? We talked a little bit about what if we turned our account managers into resource managers and orchestrators rather than being the best salespeople. Why do we create specialists for life? How do we change our sales enablement, and so on and so forth? So part of what I'm trying to do is say we need to think about our strategy and about the skill, how we're going to engage our customers and what they face, and the skills we need to intercept our customers the way we want. So that's it. If you could slip to the back slide, Diana. Here, you can contact me. If you want a copy of Sales Manager's Survival Guide, just send me your mailing list. I'll send you a copy, your mailing address. I'll send you a copy of it. I'll make sure Chad and team have a copy of this sales competency model so you can kind of look at it. If you want to continue this discussion either as a smaller group or one-on-one, clearly I have a huge passion around this. We're trying to figure out the answers and work with some of the best people in the world to help figure these out. But it's actually really a really exciting problem to solve.
Dave, thank you so much. This is Chad. Just to kind of recap. What a wonderful dialogue. So just as a kind of a form of a quick recap, what I loved today was the member-driven. First, Dave's content is always spot on, so hopefully others feel that as well in terms of his background and experience. I love Brian's point at RSA about the kind of impatience factor of sales reps today, wanting to kind of jump to the next new thing. Andrew at HubSpot talking about the fact that grit is a skill that they're testing for. Really fascinated by, maybe as we follow up in the LinkedIn group, how you test for grit. He had some exercises. Bill at IBM talking about operational knowledge and how that's critical in the way that they're looking at sales. I love Mark's point at Sprinkler about these strategic business reviews and how they're thinking more critically about a seller and owning a franchise. We had John at Convo offer a couple different perspectives about the frontline sales managers and how to coach to them. So, part of the course, we have great member dialogue. We're going to capture this feedback and update you, because I think we're adding to our list of skills that we talked about through just the experience of the practitioners on the phone. And what I would encourage us to do, and just recap to think of our next steps, is let's first, when we will share with the members this new updated skill set that comes from your feedback in combination with David's thoughts. Two, I think sharing these competency models with your sales leaders and starting to instigate a dialogue, as Dave said, about not what you're finding in terms of a chemistry fit, but what are you trying to do with the business and what skills and attributes will fit that need, I think would be a real productive, tangible next step. I like the concept of quantifying the impact of a bad hire, or looking at this person as an investment in the multi-millions, and we can help in that regard as well. And I think just following up with the LinkedIn groups on this dialogue and with the content we republish are kind of tangible next steps that we'd love to do with the members. So thank you again. You guys don't disappoint. Fertile conversation, member-driven dialogue. Loved all the feedback. Want to thank Dave again for his time. Thank the members for your time, and wish you a happy Friday.